Today we're going to talk about insulation and how we decided to do our house. So first off, I'll talk about the insulation that we chose for our house. There are a million variables to look at, so I'm just going to cover ours, and you might choose differently for your house. We went with bad insulation in its face. This has a asphalt paper vapor barrier on it, and that always faces to the heated side of the house. And we have to look at the joist spacing. We have a cathedral ceiling up there, 24 on center. And so we want it to fill the entire volume of that 24 on center. So this is specifically designed for that. We also want to look at the depth. If you have a 2x4 wall, a 2x6 wall, a 2x12 like we do in our cathedral ceiling, you want that depth to completely fill that void up there so you don't have an air space, except for a small space in the top where the air flows, but we'll talk about that later and what we put up there. And this particular piece is an R30 that was used in the ceiling. You see here it says R30. And on the outside walls on the mudroom and the outdoor kitchen, those are 2x4 walls, and they're 16 on center. So we had to buy a completely different insulation with that. And because it's only a 2x4 wall, we could only go with R15. But those are unconditioned spaces, and we really insulated them to hold a little bit of heat, but also for soundproofing. So not necessary that they need to be significantly high like it does inside the house. So the big question is, do you staple it to the inside of the joist, or do you put it over the face of the joist or your stud? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to answer that question because you will find a million different opinions online from experts all over the place, and you probably won't agree with what I say anyway. So I'll just tell you this. Up in the ceiling, I chose to do it this way. And then on the walls, I chose to do it over the face. But I will say, you should check with your local code because code sometimes requires a specific method of stapling that to the joist or the studs. All right, we're doing the cathedral ceiling baffles. These baffles direct airflow from the soffit all the way up to the top and out of the ridge vent and the other soffit that's on that clear story overhang. It's only about 18 inches. So the end pieces are a little bit different because you want to block this insulation off from the actual soffit so that it doesn't get moisture on the end of this and air doesn't come through. So you kind of have to fold these over. They're super delicate. So if you fold too much, they'll break, and if they catch on the nail, they'll rip. It's kind of a pain, really. So they just kind of tuck in there like this, and then you want to make sure they're tucked under this guy, directing that flow up to the top. Now you can see how it's very brittle. It's like a potato chip. Okay. And by the way, as I'm doing this, I can feel that cold air rushing through the soffit. It's just like a constant flow right here, and then it really blocks off here, so it's kind of nice. And then you just staple these into place here, and they stay enough that when you put the insulation in, the insulation actually, that holds it up too. But quite honestly, I've seen there's probably about an inch gap between the insulation and this. But I'm guessing that's going to relax because that insulation is really packed up tight when it's put in the containers. So we'll keep doing this, and Daniela, keep watching me.
I'm moral support, honey.
Moral support. just some clarification. We don't necessarily insulate a roof. We insulate a living space. And an example of that is right here. This has a tiny little attic above it. So there's a flat ceiling here, but there's a 312 roof above that. So the flat ceiling is insulated, but there's airspace up in this tiny little triangular pocket behind me. But on the front side, I want to insulate that because that's living space. The difference here is the cathedral ceiling, where there is no flat roof. That is the roof and the ceiling on the inside. So that insulation covers that entire gap there. And the only airspace is between the foam that we put above that goes from the soffit all the way to that soffit up there to allow air to flow freely and prevent condensation. Eventually this ceiling is going to be wood plank. However, it's going to take a while for those wood planks to dry, and in the meantime I wanted to have an actual ceiling. It also helps hold the insulation up there, it keeps that fiberglass dust from falling down in the living space, and having the drywall above the wood actually provides slightly more insulation and some soundproofing because we have a metal roof and a cathedral ceiling. And when it rains, or heaven forbid when it hails, it can get a little bit noisy in here. So certainly the drywall doesn't hurt, it helps a little bit, and it's cost effective because to do this entire ceiling is about $200 to $300, which is a drop in the bucket when you consider the overall cost of the house. Putting that insulation in sure made a difference as far as heat retention, but it also made a huge difference in sound. We noticed the first morning we woke up and we didn't hear the rooster because it wasn't coming through the soffits like it was before. Well, thanks again for watching. If you've subscribed, thanks very much, and please leave a comment in there. We learn a lot from those, and other people do too. If you haven't subscribed, join us on our journey. We'll see you next week.